Welcome to the NHL Roundup. I'm your host, Brandon. And on the show today, joining us today is journalist David P. Stein. Hello, David. How are you doing?
Hi, Mr. Brandon Plant. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. To start things off, I would like to talk about the John Scott fiasco at the All-Star game and how the internet voted him in.
Well, this is the way the system is set up in place. The fans get to vote, so obviously the fans decided, and they spoke, and they wanted John Scott, and I guess they wanted to mock the NHL a little bit. So it is what it is. I think he's handling it like an absolute pro, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to tune in to watch because he's playing, and I think it's going to end up being a good story for the NHL.
For sure.
Even though they tried to almost make a bit of a big stink about it, and the whole fiasco with him getting traded, and the story that he had. Beautiful story that he wrote on the Players Tribune.
Great story.
I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it was a great story by him, and I think a lot of people are pulling for him now, and I think the views will be up there for the All-Star game, which has kind of become a bit of a boring game in the last recent years.
Yeah, slow pace. No one's trying. It's become dull.
Yeah, the 3-on-3. It'll be kind of cool to see him play 3-on-3 hockey too, because I don't know if he's really equipped to play in that kind of game, but it'll be kind of fun.
Right?
I think the players are embracing it, and I think they're going to try to set him up for some goals.
Hope so.
Wouldn't be surprised if he has a couple goals, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd be crazy. Twitter would light up for sure.
Yeah, that's why I think a lot of guys are going to be trying to pass him the puck, and I think they're embracing it, which is nice to see.
It's nice. It's a great story. It's definitely made me more interested into the All-Star game.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to watching him?
Or for sure. I'm obviously looking forward to watching Erik Karlsson, but definitely I voted him. I also voted for him. I thought it was a great story, and I'm just happy. I'm happy that he's in, especially after reading the story on the Players Tribune. I'm definitely happy he's in with his kids. It's with the pictures he put. It's a very nice story, and hopefully nothing happens, and nothing. Hopefully he gets called up to the NHL with the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that'll be such a good thing, but I guess they can't get any worse. So
yeah, exactly. Speaking in general about the All-Star game, what are you excited about, and what players do you think you should watch?
Well, gotta start, I guess, with John Scott. I guess that doesn't really happen too often. That you've got a player like that in the game. So certainly I'll be paying attention to him, and I'm sure most people will. But I think also a guy like Jaromir Jagr, who's, of course, the ageless wonder and still producing at a really high level with the Florida Panthers, and legend and future Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer. And
leading scoring, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be really great to watch him. Certainly, I'm excited to see him play in the All-Star game. And I guess if I had to pick one more guy, I guess I'll say a guy like PK Subban is always fun to watch as a Montrealer, and I'm sure he'll embrace the All-Star festivities in Nashville.
I'm sure he would.
How about you?
Personally, I would like to watch John Scott. And obviously Erik Karlsson, he's a speedy defenseman that he embraces 3-on-3 overtime also. If you watch some SENS games, he's very good in the 3-on-3 overtime. And it's interesting to see what he will do with Jaromir Jagr and Stamkos. And let's see all these elite players playing together. It's definitely should put on a good show in 3-on-3 overtime.
Absolutely, yeah, it's going to be great. He's a great skater, so I think he'll enjoy the open ice.
Yeah, for sure. But speaking about PK Subban and the Habs, what's going on with the Habs lately? Why are they slumping? Why all of a sudden they're starting to lose? And there's been talks about Michel Therrien being fired. Marc Bergevin's a horrible GM, some say. No scoring, apparently poor goaltending. What's your opinion on that situation?
Well, everyone's got an opinion. It just seems like things have really snowballed here in the last 2 months since everyone dates back to the famous game on December 2nd, I believe it was, or maybe it was December 3rd against the Washington Capitals when this whole slide all started.
Yeah.
And the Canadians pretty much dominated a hockey game and got goalied by Braden Holtby at the Bell Center. And ever since that game, it just seems like the wheels have kind of come off, and not so gradually, but just completely fell off. And it's at this point a serious confidence issue. I mean, the whole team, it just seems like the way they're playing, it's, they're playing not to lose, as GM Marc Bergevin had pointed out in his press conference last week, and they're not playing to win. Yeah. And they're afraid to make mistakes, and when you play like that, mistakes happen, and it just seems like without, the backbone of their team, and, they all wanted to say before the season that there's so much more than Carey Price, and it's starting to look like goaltending right now is really hurting them, and it's really like it's hard to win games when your goaltending save percentage, the average is .890. So
yeah, for sure.
It's hard to really say pinpoint exactly how bad the loss to Carey Price is.
You can't
has hurt them because
there's no scoring also.
If they had average league goaltending, we don't know where they'd be. But of course, right now it's a big issue, and they're having trouble winning. They're having trouble putting together consecutive victories, and the last 2 months have been horrendous. So it'll be interesting to see if they can turn the tide a little bit, but I'm not so sure a coaching change will get is necessarily the answer, and I don't really pin that on Marc Bergevin, but I do think he's got to go out and give his coach maybe a little bit something more to work with.
Yeah, speaking about that on the trades, have you heard of any trades involved with the Canadiens for Jonathan Drouin or anyone else?
Definitely heard a few rumors and here and there, and there are a few teams, of course, been linked to Drouin, and I know Doug Armstrong and Steve Yzerman are very close.
For sure.
So something there potentially maybe with St. Louis, and there's also a connection between Jonathan Drouin and Patrick Roy, the head coach of Colorado Avalanche.
Colorado,
so
for sure.
Maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
Of course, there's the French connection between him and growing up in Montreal and playing for his hometown team here.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure Marc Bergevin is in on it, but knowing the way Marc Bergevin operates, he's certainly not going to mortgage anything in the future to acquire Jonathan Drouin. He's not going to put this team at risk and handcuff them long term just to get Jonathan Drouin. He's going to make a move that makes sense, and if the move is there, I think he'll pull the trigger. But he's not the kind of guy that's going to get influenced by the media and by the recent struggles of the Canadiens. And he certainly has a plan, and he's going to follow it regardless of who's whispering what into his ear. For sure.
Definitely the Sanders are out of that talks, though. There's been reports, obviously, that the Tampa Bay Lightning are good at that. They would trade Jonathan Drouin to the Sanders, but they would have to give up either CC or they would have to give up Chabot and Prince/Pumple, and that obviously will not happen. Jonathan Drouin is definitely a skilled player, but we can't give up defense when we need defense, and we can't give up Prince or Pumple because those are our future players too.
Absolutely.
Continuing on with the East, what's going on with the Panthers, especially the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes lately? They've been on fire. The Carolina Hurricanes are 1 point out of a playoff spot. Panthers are top in the Atlantic Division. What's going on with them?
Well, we spoke a bit about the Canadian struggles and how there's a little bit of a snowball effect, or a lot of a snowball effect, but I think it works both ways. And I think if you see teams like that who are considered quote unquote surprise teams, especially recently with the Carolina Hurricanes, I think in this league, confidence could do so much. And I think when a team starts to get hot or starts to get cold, it's very easy for things to snowball in this league, and things can snowball quite quickly. And it just seems like the Carolina Hurricanes are playing with this kind of
mojo,
newfound life that's like
the Calgary Flames.
That I guess a team without pressure to make the playoffs doesn't face, and it's a little bit. I guess they're playing with a little bit less weight on their back than some teams like the Canadians. And the Panthers certainly they went into the season with hopes to be in the playoff picture, and I certainly am not surprised that they're in the playoff picture. But as far as being one of the top teams in the East, I think certainly the Jaromir Jagr addition is has been a big key factor there, and I
Stellar
think
goaltending.
they've embraced that, and their young players like Barkov and Huberdeau and Ekblad, and certainly Luongo in the net. It's really been a joy to watch. I've seen a few of their games, and it's a young group. It's an exciting team. It's certainly play an exciting brand of hockey. And recently they've been one of the hottest teams in the NHL. So seeing them get hot and have that little bit of a snowball effect, it just seems like they're playing with so much confidence, kind of like the Canadiens were early on in the season.
Yeah. Speaking about continuing still with the East, because the West is very divided up. Some surprises with Calgary and Winnipeg not very close to the playoff spot, but Vancouver's close, hanging on there. But sticking with the East wildcard race is getting really crazy now. With, as I said, we discussed just before, Carolina's picking up, Florida's on top. Would you be surprised though if Carolina or Philadelphia or surprising teams like that would make the playoffs, and the Senators and the Canadiens and Pittsburgh would not, or maybe even Tampa Bay?
Well, it is the NHL, and it is, in my opinion, the most competitive league in professional sports. I think the parity in the NHL is as strong as any league.
Yeah.
And certainly those are teams, Carolina in particular and Philadelphia, that I did not have making the playoffs prior to the season. Although I will say that there is still over 30 games to go, and I know it's a good portion of the season is already gone, but there's certainly time for teams like the Canadiens or the Senators to turn it around and figure things out. I know Carey Price will come back at some point. I don't know when. Montrealers are hoping it's within the next couple of weeks here, but if that could be a change in the Canadiens lineup, that could help. And I'm sure the Senators, as well with some of their injuries, could get hot too soon.
Kyle Turris and Clark MacArthur.
So it's absolutely Clark MacArthur, as you mentioned, and Kyle Turris. So certainly those teams can still find themselves back in the playoff picture.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's very close.
I think right now, it's a nice story that Carolina has really, they're in the running for it, and I think it's making things interesting on their GM Ron Francis too, was probably considering shopping Eric Staal earlier on in the season, and now I wonder where he stands on that.
Yeah. But talking about the whole NHL now, what playoff team surprises like Carolina, Philadelphia? But let's go to the West about that. What teams, especially like the Arizona Coyotes, what teams in the West have surprised you the most for being in a playoff position and have slumped to be way out of a playoff position?
Well, you mentioned the Coyotes. That would definitely be a team that's been a very nice surprise. And I know when they came to the Bell Center, I had a chance to watch them beat the Canadiens earlier on in the season, and just to see some of their young guys play. And you knew that a guy like Max Domi was going to be a strong player, and you knew that he was going to, especially once McDavid got hurt, compete for the Rookie of the Year.
The Calder.
And it's been nice to watch him, and also to watch Anthony Duclair, who was on the New York Rangers last year, and who's from Pointe Claire, actually, my hometown in Montreal, and watch those guys have some success. And I guess the John Scott saga brought a little bit more attention to them at that point. But they've definitely been a surprise, and I think Dave Tippett's a phenomenal coach, and his results have spoken for themselves. That would be one team, and you know what? I guess I got to say, just given how poorly they started and their season last year, it's been kind of neat to see Colorado come back and rebound and get themselves back in the playoff picture. I think they have a pretty good team, and I think certainly up front they have really a lot of top guns, but the way they started off the season, and they have all those Matthew Shane rumors, and to see them be able to turn it around and get themselves into a spot where they're back in the picture, certainly, and see Jerome McGinley score his 600th goal this year. Some of the ups and downs that team has gone through, I guess that's kind of a neat surprise too.
Yeah, for sure. But another one that we haven't talked about is Columbus Blue Jackets. They haven't been exactly plagued by injuries, except, of course, Bobrovsky, who's been 3 times out with a groin injury. But what's going on there? They fire their coach. John Tortorella is now their coach, and they trade Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones, which I think the Blue Jackets won. They got Seth Jones because Ryan Johansson wanted out of Columbus. So getting a top 2, top 4 defenseman out of that for their future, very young, very bright future for him, is definitely a steal and a great trade for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, the Blue Jackets were definitely kind of a popular pick to be in the playoff picture before the season started.
Yeah.
I was never really fully sold on them that they were going to be a playoff team. I definitely didn't think they'd be a bottom feeder like they have been.
Yeah, for sure.
But certainly that trade has been, it was a great hockey trade, and it's something you don't really see these days in the NHL. It's kind of hard in the salary cap era because you see teams locking up their young players to long-term deals pretty early on in their careers these days. But to see a defenseman and a forward and a one-for-one deal like that was kind of cool. And I think time will tell who the winner of that trade was. But I think both teams kind of got what they needed.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Johansson was kind of wanted out of Columbus, and so he gets a fresh start in Nashville, a team that's starving for offense and already has a really, really top blue, really like a strong blue line with Weber and Yossi and Ryan Ellis. So definitely they got what they need, and I think in a few years down the line, I think we're going to see that Seth Jones is a perennial Norris Trophy candidate. So they're going. Columbus is building their blue line now, and I think they've kind of realized that they're probably not ready to win just yet, and certainly they're getting a young player in return too, who's going to be key to their future. So I think it was a great trade, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next few years.
For sure. What team do you see sneaking in to the playoffs and making a deep run in the playoffs, like let's say 2012 LA Kings?
Well, just because you mentioned the 2012 LA Kings, I guess I'll talk a bit about the fact that I didn't think in 2012 that team was a typical 8th place team. I think
that's for sure too. It was very tight.
I think that LA Kings team was not as much of a Cinderella team as people think, and I think they kind of had underachieved significantly in the regular season. And then if you remember, the coaching change that brought in Daryl Sutter, and then they made some acquisitions at the deadline. And then that team they limped into the playoffs a little bit. They squeaked in, and then when they made some noise, it seemed like it was a big surprise to everyone. But then I think when everyone took a look at their roster, they realized maybe that the team had underachieved more than they thought in the regular season. So I hate to be a bit of a homer here, but I would say if the Canadians were to get into the playoffs, I really
was Price healthy?
I don't see. And if Price is healthy, of course, I mean, that's a big if, but I think he'll be back sooner rather than later. I mean, that's a team that as much as, I don't want to sound like I'm rooting for a hometown team here, but I don't think that team is an 8th place team. I think they're much stronger than that, and I think going into the playoffs without as much pressure as they have in the last couple of years as a top team would probably help them as far as the expectations go. And I think it would somehow put them a little bit under the radar. And I think, that would help them in a series against a top team like Washington or whatever. And I think they'd surprise a lot of people, but I don't think in that locker room there'd be too many surprises. I think they're a confident team, and if they were to get in with a healthy Carey Price, I think that team could certainly make some noise.
For sure. We have some breaking news, actually. The Los Angeles Kings are set to host the 2017 All-Star Game. They're definitely going to switch the voting format on the internet, so something like John Scott does not happen again. But what's your opinion on the LA Kings hosting the 2017 All-Star Game?
I think it's great. We're just talking with them, and obviously they've won 2 Stanley Cups in the last 3 years. 4 years, actually. Sorry, going back to 2012, excuse me. And so they've been a top team in the league and a marquee franchise recently with all the success that they've had. So on top of that, putting the game in a market like LA, which is clearly a lot of celebrities around that that community, getting to maybe check out the All-Stars, and It's a great building, Staples Center. So I think it's a pretty cool move by the NHL, and I don't think it's been there since I think it's been at least 15 years since it's been there. I think when I was a kid, I remember there was an All-Star game there, but now I think it'll be pretty neat now that the LA Kings are one of the top teams in the league and have had so much success recently.
Yeah, for sure. Since this is a Sense Talk, this is the Sense Talk channel. Let's talk about the Senators really quickly. What do you think the Senators need to do to make the playoffs, to stay consistent, and just maybe make a run in the playoffs for sure?
Well, we saw them get hot last season, and we saw them
around
make
this
that
time,
incredible run that got them to the playoffs. And still thinking about it, that was just, to me, it was probably like one of the best stories of the year as far as I'm concerned in sports. And just to see a team get that hot, and obviously to do something like that again is a lot to ask. But as far as that, a lot of the components of that run are still in place, and a lot of the guys in that locker room were there last year. So it's the same coach, the same locker room. So obviously there is some magic there in order to to put together a run like that. So I think that team's got to get hot at the right time, and we saw that if they do get hot, it's a team that can get really hot. So as far as getting healthy, that's always going to help, and getting some good goaltending and some consistent goaltending, and of course they have their stars in Bobby Ryan and Erik Karlsson and Mark Stone and Mike Hoffman. So those guys are going to have to lead the charge, and I think it's about just getting more consistent for that group. And I think once they've proven last year that if they can catch fire, that fire can be pretty hot.
Yeah, for sure. And going to the deadline, which is on February 29th, the Senators they've been interested with Chris Russell from the Calgary Flames. Bruce Garriott's reports. What do you think? Do you agree with me saying that the Senators definitely need to trade to get a top 4 defenseman to go with Cody Ceci? Because the defense has been outrageous lately.
I think so. I think they're missing probably a top 4 defenseman. I think that could really help them stabilize things on the back end and probably make things a bit easier on their goaltenders. And just for their overall team defensive game, it's underrated to have a really strong second pairing, and obviously we know with Karlsson, who can log a lot of minutes, but in order to really stabilize things and to really give that group a lift, I think that would be a good addition to try to find someone who can play some top 4 minutes and really eat up some minutes. Definitely help on the penalty kill, special teams, and stuff like that as well. So if I were the Senators, I would be certainly looking in that direction, and I'm sure they are, and I'm sure they'll be able to acquire a player to help in that regard.
Thank you, David, for joining us.
Oh, anytime. It was my pleasure, and you have my number. You can call me anytime I'll do this. It'll be my pleasure.
For sure. Follow us on Twitter at SensTalk1992 for live tweeting updates of Sens games and breaking news of the Senators. Follow my personal Twitter account at Plant_Brendan for live breaking news of the Sens and of course the NHL. Follow my friend here, David P. Stein, on Twitter at what's your Twitter handle, David?
It's at DaveStein13, DaveStein13.
Make sure to follow him there on Twitter. Like us, Facebook at SensTalk. Add us to your circles, Google Plus at SensTalk. Click the big red button down there, subscribe to us. Like this video, share this video wherever you share cool stuff. Comment below what topics we should talk next time. I'll see you in the next video. Go Sens Go, and this is the NHL Roundup. I'll see you in the next video. Go Sens Go.